It's Friday, Philosophy Friday, where sometimes we get together on Fridays and we talk about things that matter. My name is Corinne Phillips, and this is Fresh Pea Cooks. Today I want to talk to you about judgment versus opinion, or opinion versus judgment. I came across this quote yesterday by Rumi. Conventional opinion is the ruin of our souls. Jalaluddin Rumi. Have you ever had one of those weeks where things just keep happening? Like the same message keeps reappearing in various forms? This has been one of those weeks. It's actually been a couple weeks where the distinction between opinion and judgment has surfaced over and over in various ways. Then last week, a cousin of a friend of mine posted the question, what is the difference between a judgment and an opinion? The thing I love so much about social media, and for those of you that follow me on Facebook know this, is the vast and different and instant response you get to questions like this. I love posing a question and getting the feel or the pulse of a culture and how vastly different we are in our responses. What interested me about Beth's post the most was the thoughtful distinctions between the two, between the definition of an opinion versus a judgment. Now, when we're talking about words like opinion and judgment, these words often have connotation. We all bring to the table our own definitions. So I think it's important to define judgment and opinion. I'm not going to narrow it down specifically to a definition because I want to pose that question for you guys. But I do want to narrow it down. So in our human brains, our developmental brain, our reptilian brain, if you, so to speak, the reptilian brain is our primal brain. It's the first part of our brain to develop in utero. It's also what's responsible for that fight or flight mechanism, those survival instincts. And we call those heuristics. So these are patterns that we have learned, judgments, if you will, that we have learned over the years to associate harm or dangerous scenarios with events that we've had. For instance, when I lived in the city, I would walk to and from work, and in the winter it was dark both ways. And being a woman walking alone in the city at dark, I had this heightened sense of awareness. My hearing was better, my seeing was better. I was more conscious of my surroundings. I was looking in alleys, I was looking in driveways, because this is an innate heuristic of mine. Danger could be lurking, and I had to be on high alert because I was alone and I'm female. So that means I'm not as strong as a possible perpetrator. So that is a heuristic. That is one of those shortcuts that we've made that has allowed us to stay safe and survive. We're not talking about that kind of judgment. We're not talking about that really necessary, sharp, keen sense of judgment that is primal or survival. I'm talking about the kind of judgments that we make every day based on small little bits of information that we then, in essence, fill in the rest from our own perspective. Who was it that said, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are? I'm going to have to look that one up. It's true. We filter the world through our own life experiences. And when we see things, we often see them through the lens of what we are or what we aren't. And those two concepts are really salient because it shapes how we interpret our world. It shapes how we interpret the actions of others. So my question to you is, are opinions the same as judgments? And if not, how do they differ? Now, the topics for these Philosophy Fridays come out straight out of my own life, out of things that I've been dealing with, or questions that I've been thinking about, or experiences that come to me and make me think, why? So yesterday I was on a forum and I read a really brilliant definition for judgment. It was written by a man by the name of Murat Morrison, and he wrote, "Judgment is just an opinion hardened by pride." I love that. And this concept of judgment being more solid, being hardened, is a similar concept that was spoken throughout that thread of Beth's last week. And this concept of opinion is being something that's fluid and fresh or young. And judgment is being an opinion that has been solidified somehow. Which leads me to my question. If judgment is a hardening or a solidifying of opinion, is there a rescindment, a conscious strategy that we can use to loosen these hard, fast stories? Stories that we've created based on our opinion. And we form opinions much like we form heuristics, by taking little experiences of our past that may have gone poorly or may have gone well, and then we overlay them onto our current story, our current experience, and we form an idea of whether that is good or bad. But what I see over and over again, and what I think is so dangerous, is when we have an opinion which is in essence a story we've told ourselves, and we believe it to be the truth. Now, our opinions, or these stories that we tell ourselves, help us to make sense of our world. Where we have to be careful is when the opinion is based from fear versus reality. To go back to the example of me walking home at night in a city alone, had I been attacked, I would have a very different motivation and a very different fear and a very different perspective of walking home at night. I might not walk home at night alone. But since I had done this for years without any detrimental effect, I'm aware, but I'm not fearful. Neither one of those are right or wrong. It's almost like Schrodinger's cat, right? Where both of these things can exist simultaneously. Both possibilities could be true. Both possibilities would definitely color my opinion. Does being attacked versus not being attacked make me any more or less safe in the scenario that I found myself in? Now, if you're American and you watch the news, you are constantly bombarded by fear, messages of what to do and what not to do based on the worst case scenario. This child was abducted. Don't let your kids outside. Whatever the story is, whatever the headline is. And it plants that seed that this is something to fear. The detrimental part of being motivated by fear is that it keeps us within the confines of our comfort zone, this little safe space that we find ourselves in. But just like any box, that's very limiting. Back to my question earlier. If judgment is a hardening, a solidifying of these opinions, is there some way, mentally, cognitively, consciously, we can soften that solidifying, or we can hold space for alternate possibilities, for two things to exist in the same plane at the same time? One that we have is our personal story, that we've grabbed on to believe is true. The other is no less true. We just haven't experienced it yet. So could there be some way to soften our innate, our reptilian, our instinctual sense of making judgments, hard and fast, concrete judgments? And we do this every day. Unfortunately, we do this toward other people. We make judgments about people that we know very little about or nothing about. We make judgments about situations that we may or may not have experienced before. And if the judgments are made out of fear, we go back into that safe spot. I believe there is a way for us to soften these judgments that we make when we have very little information or we have a limited amount of experience. And I believe that that way is through compassion. Brené Brown, who is a researcher / storyteller, I love that definition, has the best definition for compassion that I've heard. And she says, compassion is nothing more than perspective taking. Can you hold the perspective of somebody else simultaneously without compromising your belief system or your perspective, and try to imagine what that would be like, what it must be like to be that person, to see life through those eyes? Which then begs the question, can you inquire into the actions of another without passing judgment? The older I get, I realize how much my upbringing shapes or colors my perspective of the world. Now, I was raised that opinions are like, we all have one, you just don't go wagging yours about. My husband, on the other hand, was raised that opinions are just a natural part of conversation. Now, these various perspectives might seem kind of vague, but it's a very different way of relating to one another. Now, I'll use an example from my own life. Not long ago, Glenn and I were talking about something, and he shared his opinion. And I said, I don't really want to hear your opinion. And he said, well, if I can't share my opinion, it'll just build up in me. And I'll feel this pressure. Now, for starters, gentlemen, when your wife studied psychology and you don't have a super good grasp on emotional language, you might not want to start this conversation. But my husband is brave and he loves to learn. So this brings me back to the question of compassion. What if these belief systems, what if these stories that we tell ourselves are really our own lesson, our own lessons in compassion, in perspective taking? Because we know what we know. We know our own stories. We could tell you concretely, inside and out, what we believe. And many of us do. But what if these judgments are our own lessons in compassion, perspective taking, our own lessons to walk a mile in someone else's shoes? What if compassion is the missing ingredient in connecting with your neighbor, with your friends, with your spouse, with your family on a deeper level? So that's what's been on my mind lately. And yeah, judgments and opinions, how do they differ? Do they differ? Are they synonymous? What are your thoughts on those? And if judgment is a sort of hardening, a solidifying, is there a better way that you can think of to ease that, to make room or hold space for more fluidity, for more possibility, of not being entrenched in what we think we know to be safe, to make sense of the world, but to hold space for something else. Doesn't change how we believe, doesn't change how we see. Our perspective is all we have. But to hold space for somebody else's truth. We've all heard the sayings not to judge somebody until you walk a mile in their shoes. But yet we do it. And when we believe a story over the truth, we are keeping ourselves safe, keeping ourselves small, and we're distancing ourselves from a whole world of unknown, of new, of things that we can learn, of experiences that may or may not be comfortable. Growth is not always comfortable. That is what has been on my mind lately. And as I was doing some research, I came across one of those old psychological conundrums of, is trust necessary for love? And I've been doing a little research on that. So if you'd like to see future Philosophy Friday, grappling with that question, leave a message below. Oh, and YouTube made a change. So many of you have sent me messages saying that you're not seeing my videos in your feed anymore. Don't know, but it's been changed. So you're seeing like recommended videos, which may or may not have anything to do with your interests. So if you all want to see when I post a new video, go to my channel page, freshprincesscooks, and right where the subscribe button is, you'll see a little bell. Click that, and then you have the option to get notifications right there. So bell me. I don't know why they do this, but they do it anyway. So click the bell. You guys know what to do. Thumbs up, leave a comment, share the video if there's somebody that you think would benefit from Philosophy Friday, or cooking, or crazy antics. I have exciting news to share with you. I'm so excited. I so want to share it right now, but I'm working on a video, so I'm not going to do a spoiler. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know this already, and Facebook. I'll put my social media links below if you are inclined, and I'll see you in the next video. So before I start making these videos, I do a fair amount of research to see what other people have to say. And it helps me kind of fill in the proposition. Fill in the, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay.